Well, I want to welcome everyone to out on the west side. We're just on top of sort of the petroglyph escarpment out at Paseo Del Norte and Kimmick. And this is we're here because we're going to talk about things infrastructure and transportation, but also because behind me is the nexus of the worst traffic problem in the city of Albuquerque. And so I'm excited that in conjunction with our city councilor who's going to speak today, and also some legislators who's helped out, I think we're finally going to be able to do something about this in the very near future as opposed to 10 years down the road. So first, let me give some updates on Corona and our Joint Information Center, and then we'll get into our topic for today, which is, again, mostly about this issue, but under the auspice of some transportation tax bonds that we're going to be issuing. And these are going down to council, I think Friday officially. So these are going to be in council hands soon, which is also why we wanted to inform the public what we're up to. We are near a construction site, so there are a lot of trucks kind of passing by, so I might pause here and there for a few of them. But first and foremost, the New Mexico Department of Health has posted updated guidance on their website to offer an overview of strategies for the public and healthcare providers and employers. And this documentation can be found at nmhealth.org. And that's again with respect to Corona, face masks, and office space health. The City of Albuquerque Economic Development Department is seeking local vendor bids through September 14th for PPE to include face masks, sanitizer, gloves, and more. And so as a reminder, Council appropriated some funds to help businesses. We're working with the different chambers on how to get this out to businesses, but part of it is also purchasing that equipment or that supply. And so we'll probably have this program wrapped up and ready to explain in about 2 weeks, but we did want to announce that part of it is actually trying to buy those things locally. And so we know we could get them right away from a national vendor, but we've got a little bit of time, so we're hoping some local folks will apply for that. All right, and again, contact our Economic Development Department for details on that. Also, we want to inform everybody to watch out for scammers with respect to contact tracing. We are starting to see that people are posing as contact tracers and asking for information, and I think most importantly, payment. So I want to remind you that contact tracing does not involve any kind of payment. So if anyone asks you for that, just stop talking to them. And also ask for clear identification status. And contact tracers typically only ask for your birth date. They usually do not ask for your social security number, your credit card info, or your immigration status. So if you ask those questions, please stop talking to them and you can contact our Consumer Protection Office. Okay, let's talk about why we're here today. Want to begin by letting folks know that way back in April, we moved fast to accelerate now what has been almost $100 million worth of construction projects in Albuquerque. And we did this for a couple of reasons. We did it, one, to keep people employed and to lift up our economy and create hundreds of jobs when there were basically no jobs happening. It also allowed a lot of these hourly workers, working families who are engaged in construction to literally continue to get a paycheck. We're now seeing how this is literally buffering our economy during a downtime. And we're seeing that the construction industry is one of the strongest industries over the course of the summer. And as a result, the city is getting the GRT off that. So we're getting essentially a return on our investment. So we have found that this kind of old school Depression era strategy for job creation and also building things that our city needs anyway is a winning strategy for us. And so we are going to be doing another round of that. And fortunately, we have a really strong finance team at the city. Of course, at the council level, but also our CFO, Sanjay Bhakta, and Lawrence Rael, our COO. These folks continue to find ways to get money to plow into infrastructure without raising your taxes. And typically the answer is bonding, and that is exactly what we're doing here today. So we are announcing, and again, the City Council has to approve this. We're going to hear from our chairman of the Budget Committee, of the Committee of the Whole, and the councilor from this area. But if Council should so bless this project, we are going to be able to issue bonds to invest over $50 million in infrastructure that is related to transportation. And this is related to the quarter-cent transportation tax that we already have and that voters voted to renew back last November. But because of that, we can now bond against this funding to get more money sooner so that we can finally fix this instead of just talking about it for another 10 years. So again, I don't want to go too far into the weeds on how bonds work, but this is just a good thing when it comes to utilizing finance to accelerate and bring projects to fruition now instead of having to aggregate those funds over the course of 10 years. And so it's really just smart finance on behalf of the city. So for us, these projects are going to go, a big chunk is going to widen this stretch of Paseo. And again, I think widely known as the biggest place of repeated gridlock in the city. But there are other aspects to this bond issue. It's going to help every neighborhood in the city with respect to some simple things like lighting, ADA accessibility, street safety. There's also going to be some significant investments in the Wells Park neighborhood, which is long overdue, and we're going to be able to finally fund those here. And so we'll be providing you with a full list, and I think some other folks are going to touch on this. But also some areas in like San Pedro and Alameda, which for everyone who's in that area, they know it's a fast growing part of the city, and we've got to catch up with respect to some of our intersections with respect to growth. And so there's some really good projects in here that are going to help, and a lot of complete street projects, and those are happening all over the city, as well as even an additional crosswalk in Nob Hill. So, and there's also a bunch of street lighting, another shortage in our city that we're allocating a lot towards West Mesa, the West Mesa area, and also some to the International District.
I want to welcome everyone to District 5. This is a really delightful day, and it's a beautiful day to be out here. And I want to welcome some of our guests here today, including the mayor, my fellow councilor, Councilor Benton, who will be speaking about the bond tax that we're looking at and the bill that's coming up at council very soon. Which includes the $12 million for Paseo Del Norte. I want to welcome Senator Sandra Rue, who's with us today. And I want to welcome State Representative Joy Garratt, who's with us today. There's a couple of people that weren't able to be here today because it was kind of short notice, but I also want to mention them. Senator Candace Gould, Representative Damon Eli, and Representative Karen Bash. And today I just want to announce that we are starting our first phase for, and it's a little emotional for me because, you know, one of the things that I ran on was improving the infrastructure for this area. And this is a huge piece of that infrastructure improvement. But what I'm announcing today is our first phase for the design of Paseo Del Norte from Kimmick to Rainbow to 4 lanes. And we will be phasing this project. And I mentioned our representatives, our legislative representatives, because we all worked bipartisan in a bipartisan effort to ensure that we were able to obtain the funding that that is needed for this particular project. And it's really, really bright out here, but I want to tell you what that funding is, because it's important that the public understand how this project will be phased. Phase 1 would be from Kimmick essentially to Unser, and phase 2 would be from Unser to Rainbow. The funding that came to us is a culmination of city funding from some old money that was sitting in just not being used, and we moved it in with the council's help. We started with $750,000. Then after that, the 2019 capital outlay funding that came to us was $2.1 million. And then in 2020, we were able to secure $1.9 million. That brings us And then we had a little bit of extra at the city that we moved, and so we are almost at $5 million of a $24 million project. And so what's important with that is that we are, with this bonding that Councilor Benton is going to talk about, which allocates $12 million for Paseo Del Norte, we're at about $17 million, which would be about 3/4 of the way to building this roadway. And it's really important because we have communities further west that are developed already. So this is not, it's basically serving a population that's already existing. I don't consider it sprawl. But I think that what's really important is that it's also economic development. And that is the key, because right now with COVID, as the mayor mentioned, we are looking for projects that are going to generate jobs for our community. And this project would be one of those. The consultant that the city is looking to hire is a company by the name of WH Pacific. And we have already secured their contract. And so that's another important element of this project. The first portion of this would be the design and the property acquisition that the city would need to expand the 4 lanes for phase 1. The other thing that's really important is that we have had an issue with public safety not being able to access some of those existing subdivisions to the west. When you have somebody who's in need of an ambulance or a police officer or our fire department, and they can't get through because this is all sand, as you can see out here, you can't go around the traffic that's stopped at peak hours. And so with the fire department's help and the police department and securing their numbers as well to show the need, our legislators have been really helpful in pushing this forward.
When we're talking about the transportation tax in the west side, I have to remember my friend and colleague Ken Sanchez. Ken and I were always advocates for this tax historically, at least during our time on the council, and the voters always supported this tax. We're taking a different tack with it this time, with bonding much more of the tax so that we can get more work built quickly. The bond market rates are favorable to the city now. It's a really good argument for doing this, and we had a great process with the councilors and the administration, making sure that these bonds and the proceeds from them will fund projects all over the city. This is the big one. This is the critical regional need that's been established for some time now for the city. So as a matter of policy, this is getting a big chunk of the funds, but throughout the city, important needs, transportation needs are going to be met that'll make everyone's lives more pleasant when they're trying to get around our city. As I said, I think it was a really good collaborative process where we talked to each councilor, we talked to the administration and what the administration's priorities are as well, and all these have been covered within the bond. But looking forward to seeing a lot of dirt turning, and as Councilor Borrego said, that equals a lot of jobs right now, and the administration has really stepped up during the health emergency to build a lot of projects that have been in the pipeline, and this will build even more. So we appreciate your interest in the bond. I'm happy to take questions later.
Okay, thanks so much. We have 2 representatives as mentioned. Let's start with the senior senator from the area, Senator Sanderoo.
Thank you, Mayor Keller. I think that was a reference to my age, and I take umbrage with that.
We came in at the same time.
Yes, we did. We came into the Senate together years ago, and the mayor has become a good friend over the years. Welcome to the West Side. And, you know, I want to reiterate a couple points. This was such a collaborative effort, and Republican, Democrat, you know, the old saying when it comes to potholes, there's no party affiliation. Well, the same thing applies to road infrastructure. It was funny when Councilwoman Cynthia Borrego got elected, she came up to the legislature and she told us she needed $30 million, $25 million now, and we're going to get this built. So we talked to her and said, well, it's not the way that works, really. But she's been dogged, and she comes up there and she broke it down into different phases. We need about 2.53 million plus for the planning and some of the road acquisition. And then there's a phase 1, phase 2, and that's what we as legislators like to hear. So we were able to sit down together. What we do is legislators get amount of money that they can appropriate to bricks and mortar projects and make a request if the governor would approve it. We all sat down, closed the door, and pulled out the list and said, okay, I'll put in this much, you'll put in that much. And then working with Councilwoman Borrego, she had her money. So we were able to cobble together enough to kind of get that first phase done. It was a manageable thing. But I said at the time, I'm not going to be real happy if we do this and then this thing starts 10 or 15 years down the road. And I'm delighted Mayor Keller and the administration has recognized the need that we have out here, and Councilman Benton. So we're going to move this thing forward. They found a way to do it, and I do so much appreciate that. And as was also said quickly, this isn't just a quality of life issue. You know, people that spend all that time stuck here in traffic, that's time they could spend with their families. It is certainly a public safety issue. We heard from Chief Paul Dow with Albuquerque Fire Rescue to the point that this creates a bottleneck. They can't serve these communities. They can't pull around because of the sand. That's huge. But then it's also an economic development issue. I mean, look around. This is going to be part and parcel of Albuquerque's future economic development. And the road infrastructure is critical to that. So again, I want to thank the administration, my fellow legislators, Representative GARRATT, and Councilwoman Cynthia Borrego for just not letting us forget. And I'm sure she'll be back this next session and continue to work with us. And I very much enjoy that collaboration. I'm very proud to be part of that team. Thank you.
Hi, I'm State Rep Joy Garrett, and my area, along with Sandra's area, goes all the way to the Rio Puerco. And if you're familiar with the building of Amazon, it's over on Atrisca Vista on the other side of the volcanoes. So when we talk about development, it's already happening. But three things that I've learned from this whole process is the power of collaboration, which everybody else has mentioned. We have federal resources working on the intersection of Unser and Paseo. We have our legislators coming together with this unified effort to bring millions of dollars. And then we have a forward-thinking mayor and city council who are actually producing the money to speed up the whole process. 2 weeks ago, I sat on Paseo Del Norte while a fire engine, Albuquerque rescue ambulance, and 2 police cars dealt with an accident involving 3 or 4 cars. It was very hard for them to get there because there's only single lanes in both directions. And hundreds of people waited for it to be cleared because there was no way that they could get around it. So I'm grateful that our city and our legislature realize how important this public safety issue is. There's public safety, commuters, people just going about their daily lives. So I'm just grateful for this collaborative effort that is really powering something that's going to make the quality of life, economic development, and everything work smoothly. So thank you, each and every person who's involved, who's here, each and every person who's not here. I think we're rocking it. Thanks.
Okay, I think we're about ready to take some questions. One thing I did want to mention, just in terms of numbers, we have Lawrence can field those if you need them. And we're putting in 12 million to basically make sure that we can get phase 1 done. And there was about roughly 4 million already put in by the legislature and the city, and that got all the studies done and so forth. So hence you see state and city working together on this in a very meaningful way. And I do want to also mention the governor's office. This is one NMDOT project they've been very supportive of and recognize that need too. So they've been helpful as well. Okay, I think with that, let's actually, and remind folks too, there's a lot in here. The other components of this involve a lot of pedestrian safety, both for cyclers and drivers and folks on foot.
House. This is the quarter-cent tax that was, as the mayor said, was approved by the voters back in November. The quarter-cent tax generates somewhere between $38 and $40 million a year, depending on the right now in terms of the economy, et cetera, because it is a gross receipts tax. The way the tax was structured as it was presented to the voters is that 57% of the funds from the tax are designed for roadway infrastructure improvements. Another portion of the tax, 38%, goes to transit and transit services. And then there is a small portion that goes to trails and trail projects, et cetera, and deficiencies in our trail system. The portion that we're talking about here is the portion that's related directly to the road infrastructure portion of the tax. To break that down somewhat in maybe more specific numbers, about 19 million a year is available for roadway infrastructure improvements, and that includes anything from a capacity building, adding more lanes like this project, or for fixing potholes, etc. So what we are doing with this particular bond issue is we are taking about $4.5 million of a yearly revenue source, if you will, of the revenues, and bonding against that to generate about $56 million worth of if you will, for different projects throughout the city. That we plan on going to the council, as already has a bill in place, to bond and to set the bonds in motion so that we can go out and sell the bonds. So what that leaves, it leaves us with an opportunity to invest in infrastructure using today's dollars with today's great interest rates to be able to make some major improvements. This one in particular is $12 million, which, as you've heard from everyone, that now gets us a major segment of phase, or at least a phase one done. And then phase two is another phase we can work through in the years to come. But also, it also invests a great deal of money throughout the city as a whole on many projects. And I'll give you all a list of this here shortly, but just to give you a perspective, as the mayor mentioned, San Pedro widening between Alameda and Paseo Del Norte. As you all know, this new restaurant, Tin Can Alley, has come to basically to fruition. There's lots of activity going on right at the intersection of Alameda and San Pedro, and that section of San Pedro is still a two-lane facility, so it needs to be completed. We have money scheduled for a railroad crossing at Marquette, down in the downtown area, to connect the downtown area to the development that's happening along the rail line in that area by Lomas and, if you will, the railroad tracks, where the investment has been there, as well as the connections to the film studios that are now on Broadway, etc. So that connection is really a super important connection to get folks across the railroad tracks into downtown. Other projects in here include infrastructure in the Wells Park area, completing sidewalks and lighting, etc. And then a tremendous amount of money is going out to, as the mayor said, that touches almost every neighborhood in the city, and that is a complete streets program that includes improvements to areas like West Central, if you will, improvements on West Central along Paseo Del Norte, along Coors. Wyoming and Central on the east side, Nob Hill area to improve a hawk signal and some medians, some ADA issues in a couple of areas of the city where we know we have to do more ADA improvements, putting in some funding for Rio Grande Boulevard for a complete street project. So there is a myriad of projects that are going to be funded through this tax. And as I think one of our speakers said earlier, look, the interest rates are so good today that it makes sense for us to make this investment now, because to wait for the dollars to pay on as we go basis, it just would be a lot more expensive and it would take a lot longer. And as I think Councilor Borrego and the mayor mentioned, the challenge for the West Side is that the challenge is here today, and it'll just continue to get more and more of a challenge going forward. So with that,
tax has been in place 20 years, right?
So the tax was authorized back in 1998 under a previous life of mine, and it was renewed in 2009, and then it was renewed in 2019. So we are now going into the beginning of the 21st year.
You've never bonded against
It's never been bonded against before because before the tax had a sunset on the tax. In this year's approval by the voters, there was not a sunset associated with the tax. So it gives us now much more flexibility to be able to bond against it going forward. And what's good about this is that it creates an opportunity for long-term investment in infrastructure throughout the city.
All right. Well, we appreciate it, and of course, again, this will go to council. So there's further public debate and details through that process.